Welcome back to another week of Political Breakfast, heard right here on WABE. I'm Lisa Rayam, and with me today, the whole gang is here today. Republican strategist Brian Robinson and Democratic strategist Tharon Johnson. I want to welcome Brian back. Brian, you took the week off. Good to see you.
That's right. I was out of the country. Has anything happened since I left?
I'm trying to think. Has anything happened, Tharon, in the last few days?
It seems like when one of us goes out of the country or takes some time off, things happen. But I think what just recently happened is pretty historic.
Yeah, and historic and somber in that, lives were lost and a life was lost and another person critically injured. And of course, former President Donald Trump injured as well, wounded by gunfire. Is this a sad day in America? First, tell me your initial reaction to it. Tharon, I'll begin with you, and then Brian, you follow.
Well, the first thing I thought, it was my oldest son, Tyson's birthday. And we had been together as a family celebrating his birthday, July 13th. And then I remember when I turned on the television and I saw the images of a former president ducking. I was like, wow, turn that up.
Take a look at what happened.
First and foremost, I'm going to do what I think other Americans should do, and I'm going to follow what President Biden has done. Now he's made 3 appearances since this attempted assassination, and just really say that I want to wish former President Donald Trump a speedy recovery. This is a moment, Lisa, on this podcast where politics has to play sort of a backseat, and we as Americans have to come together and talk about how we all have a role to sort of cool down and sort of minimize the rhetoric and the polarization and the attacks on other parties. And so, it's clear that me and B-Rob have our political allegiances to different parties. But one thing about this podcast is that we're very civil, and these are moments when we come together. The second thing I want to do is offer my condolences to the family of the firefighter who was killed at the hands of this gunman, and also the victims, people who were injured. The last thing is that I'm really proud of how former President Donald Trump and President Biden has handled this attempted assassination. You saw both gentlemen come out and call for unity. You saw them come out and talk about how this is not America. Political violence cannot be tolerated. They all condoned it. And so I think that, my responsibility as a strategist, as a pundit, is to follow suit. Now, let me just be brutally honest with you. I had no idea this was going to happen. You guys may remember after the bad debate performance, B-Rob knew I said this to him privately. I said, man, there's going to probably be 2 or 3 things that are going to happen before this race is over. It was going to be the conventions. I thought Donald Trump was going to, do something, and maybe Biden was going to get worse or better. But never in a million years, Lisa, that I thought that there would have been attempted assassination on a former president. So again, Donald Trump is lucky to be alive. I'm only repeating what he said. I think that I commend him for saying that he is going to change his speech at the convention. He had a speech that was written that was going to be typical Donald Trump trying to fire up his base and his voters to go out and vote for him and talk about all the things that are wrong with the Biden administration. And I'm also happy that Joe Biden has suspended campaign activity, has taken down all of his television ads, has suspended a lot of events that he was going to postpone, a lot of events that he was going to have. And so this is a time where the country has got to come together. And, this gunman, this alleged gunman, clearly was unsuccessful in killing the former president, but we did have a life that was lost from what I've been reading about this man and in the victims. And so we can talk about this, I'm sure, later on, but how do we move forward from here? I don't know, but I know that we now got to really pause and be silent and cut down the rhetoric for a temporary moment.
Yeah, a lot of to talk about what if and where do we go from here. But Brian, were you out of the country when this unfolded, and what was your initial reaction to all of this?
I was not. I had just gotten back. And in fact, I was sitting in my neighbor's driveway because I was picking her up because she had gotten us tickets to the Journey Def Leppard Steve Miller Band concert at Truist Park. So I'm sitting there in the driveway about to go do an event as white as the Trump rally was in Pennsylvania. And and it was wonderful, by the way. It was just a great show.
You can only say that, right?
Right. No, it's true. There are things I can't say. There are things y'all can't say.
I was going to talk about how white the rally was, but I was going to stay away from that. But thank you, Brian. Go ahead.
Yeah. The concert was fantastic. I'm sitting there in the driveway, and my brother texts me, Joe, and said, Trump's been shot. And I froze. First of all, I'm about to go do something recreational with a neighbor, and I'm thinking I'm going to have clients needing statements. I'm going to be asked to go be on TV and do radio and all of this stuff going on. But more than anything, I was scared. I was scared for my country. And I don't mean to be melodramatic about it. I feel like I'm on thin ice when it comes to violence in this country. I just feel like any sort of ignition can lead to a conflagration, if I'm saying that word right. And something could explode. And so my first fear was, oh my God, if they killed him. And the text I got was, Trump's been shot. So it took me, another minute or so before I figured out that he had walked off the stage. But my first thought was terror of not just a former president being killed, but of the violence that would almost inevitably follow that. And it's just very scary to me. And for some reason, my 7-year-old daughter, who is just now kind of becoming into political consciousness a little bit. She knows who Joe Biden is. She knows who Donald Trump is. She saw Donald Trump in person right before the debate here in Atlanta a few weeks ago. And she watched the clip of the shooting. You can question my parenting about whether or not I should have allowed it, but she really wanted to see it. And there's part of me that kind of wants her to know what's happening in her country. And again, question my parenting if you want to. And she was listening to Trump's speech leading up to that and then saw the gunshot. And she said, why can't they just be friends? That was her 7-year-old response. And
Powerful.
It was, why are we arguing with each other? And of course, where she gets a little oversimplificated, she said, Donald Trump can be president for a month, and then Joe Biden can be president for a month. I was like, sweetie, I'm so glad you've learned.
If only democracy worked that way, right?
Yeah. So, sweetie, I'm so glad you've learned these lessons about making sure that everyone feels included and everybody gets a turn. That's not quite how this works, but yes, we should all be friends. And I want to say, as Tharon said, sweetie, Mr. Tharon, we have this show, and that's what it's about. It's about we can disagree with these things, but we don't need to be calling each other morons and demons and evil. We can just disagree on policy. We can have disagreement on whether or not there should be a higher age limit on Social Security, but whether or not people in the highest income brackets get tax cuts, whether or not there should be a higher minimum wage, or how we approach law enforcement vis-a-vis the community. We can have those talks without this. And my appeal to Americans is this. And to Georgians, since that's our audience here, don't lose sight of the fact that, yes, people feel squeezed by inflation. Yes, people in the last 4 years have gone through periods where they felt like crime was out of control and their families were in danger. Yes, we're not a perfect country. But let's not lose sight of the fact that we're still the best country, that this is still a pretty awesome place to live. And we are extraordinarily lucky to be Americans. And we have taught ourselves, and this is true on both sides, that when the other side's in power, that everything is just horrible. And they're all stupid, they're all incompetent, and the world's coming apart, and the sky is falling, and it's somebody's fault. And it's their fault because they're incompetent, or because they're evil, because they hate America, whatever it is. And that's not true. And let's not lose sight of the fact that we're lucky people. And to go back to your question, I was scared and I'm stressed, and I don't know how we're all saying the right things. We got to unify. We've got to be peaceful. This has no place in our democracy. I'm relieved to see everybody kind of saying the same things right now. How long does that last?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But this can't become the norm in this country, because all the good things we have are going to go away if this becomes the norm in this country.
Does this kind of take us back to 9/11 and what the country was feeling and what Georgia was feeling back then? There was all this unity and let's love one another and get along with each other. And then like you just indicated, Brian, that slowly faded away as, the years passed. Are we back to that point where we're that pensive and thoughtful and really saying that we're committed to unity at this point?
So I think Brian and I definitely had similar thoughts. And so Lisa, again, on Saturday, my phone started blowing up for interviews. And I just wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to go and talk about it out of what B-Rob just talked about, Lisa, and that is fear. Because, we come on this podcast now twice a week, and you do a fantastic job of getting the best out of us. You really force us to dig deep. And this conversation sometimes can get a little hostile. It can get a little, sort of direct as far as our criticisms of the presidential candidates. And so I guess what I'm saying to you is that I think I had the same fear that a lot of people had, which is, what if this could happen to me? So now what you see is that all the leaders are coming together and calling for that unity, Lisa. But I'm going to be brutally honest with you. And this is, again, that's why this podcast is what it is that it is mixed reactions from some people that are close to me. There, of course, everyone does not want a life to be lost, right? But what I did not condone, and I pushed back on this, is that, the fact that people wanted to attack former President Donald Trump for this happening to him, right? And that was something that I would not tolerate. And so when you ask that question, is this a 9/11 moment? Yes and no. It's going to bring the country together temporarily. But I think a few things have got to continue to happen. Number one, we got to see what the convention is going to be like, right? Donald Trump has sent a message. He's saying that I'm changing my speech. He's on the ground in Milwaukee. Let's see if others follow suit. Secondly, how long will the president be able to hold this country together? Again, I applaud him. He has shown tremendous leadership. This is the Joe Biden, whether he's old or not. This is the statesman. He showed empathy. He showed sympathy. And to call your political rival, minutes after you heard that he was shot, grazed on the ear by a bullet, shows you the type of character that he has. The third thing that's got to happen, Lisa, is that all of us.
He pointed out it was a short call, though.
Well,
he said it was a real short call.
I was listening to that. Lisa, you're being real bad today. He forcing me and Brian to go do. No, well, his press team, the White House press team, said not only was it short, it was respectful. Right. And so that meant that I'm sure Donald Trump answered the call and was like, "What's up, Joe? Hey man, you okay? Yeah, man, they didn't get me. I'm fine. All right, hang in there, bud. Okay, you too." Like it probably went like that. Right? But no, I'm just joking for our people on the podcast. No. I would tell you this. So the third thing that's got to happen, Lisa, is that we as leaders, we as Americans, we got to treat each other better. And in the moment when it goes back to what it was before July 13th, we all got to pause and say, nope, don't do it, because we're all going to be tempted. I mean, the minute that another ad, another situation, another vote, another decision comes out, and I saw fear, I saw outrage, I saw concern on the faces of the people that were at that rally. And then you look at the post interviews, there was one woman who talked about, and she said verbatim, all I want to do is go home. I just want to go home. I want to be with my family. And so it's so much things that got to happen. But I just know that me as an American and as a Democrat, we got to tone it down. We got to call for unity. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not still trying to win. And I know that B-Rob's going to say the same thing. They want Trump to win. I want Joe Biden to win. But how we win and how you do it in this very chaotic, divided country right now that has come to a standstill with a failed attempted assassination. We haven't talked a lot about the motive of the gunman. So we don't know what his motive was. Did he act alone? It's just so many facts that are going to come out in the next few weeks.
Yep, that's right. Lisa, I don't think it's a September 11th moment. I do think it's going to be short-lived, and I feel that way because that's what I've seen play out here over the past 15, 20 years, that we take a day, this is terrible, and then we all go back to the status quo. And I'm not saying that to be cynical. It's not freighted with anything. It's just what I've seen happen and what I think will happen here. Again, because he did survive, I think that's going to give people just enough to be like, let's move on and get back to normal. And I tell you, that thing coming that close, woo, boy. And that was what, in those moments when I found that he was shot and I saw that grazed his ear, we're talking about a centimeter. This is an AR-15. Like if he had put off 2 or 3 at the same time, we were really close to cataclysm, and I would like to get into the politics of this, maybe in our next segment here, Lisa, as far as like how this plays out, what it means for the campaign, since we are a political show. But on a personal level, I was talking since the rally in Pennsylvania with a buddy of mine who is doing work for the Trump campaign, and he's got work in Georgia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. So 3 states that are very important to the Trump and Biden campaigns. And I said, I know you were there Saturday, weren't you? He said, I was in the tent 10 feet behind him, and the bullet came through the tent.
Wow.
And so he's sitting right there. And this is a buddy of mine, somebody I've done campaign work with in Georgia on other campaigns. And boy, that just sort of brings it home to you when you hear those sorts of stories.
Did he tell you
So
where the bystander was in relation to all of that? Because that's what we
I
haven't
never
figured
could
out
figure
or
that
heard
out
yet.
either. No, I
Yeah.
never could figure
Yeah.
that out either. And of course, he got in the detail SUVs and hightailed it out of there. But I never could figure out from the graphics exactly what happened if he was on the side behind Trump, like the bullet whizzed past and hit that other guy. I don't know.
Wow. Did it raise questions for you about the Secret Service? Because you always think the Secret Service being on point, having all bases covered, and it just didn't seem like all bases were covered. Clearly, all bases were not covered on Saturday.
The first thing is, Lisa, having worked on a presidential campaign, and just to kind of take our viewers into what happened. When I was with President Obama's campaign in 2011 and 12, because, I started in 11 and 12. It started in 2011 and then we went to 2012. It was always so much security. The Secret Service, when I tell you they did not play, and we all used to have to wear these lapel pins, and that's the way you were identified to get in certain proximity of the president. And then he was, a presidential candidate running for re-election. So to find out later that there was a gunman who was able to climb up on top of a building onto a roof and to get within 150 yards of the president and to get off shots, that's going to have to be investigated. And I'm not going to rush a judgment because there's so many law enforcement specialty people who say that shouldn't have happened, but why it happened, that's going to be left up to them to decide. Now, there has been some very interesting reports, Lisa, about how the Secret Service is really stretched thin. Not only do they protect the president, the former president, the candidates, they also protect their spouses, their children, and family, and some family members. And in this case, the siblings of Trump. And also, you have to think about the president's detail as well. So I think that, thank you to the Secret Service officers, to quote what Donald Trump said, he felt like he got hit by some linebackers. They rushed and put their lives on the line to protect this president. So I want to thank the Secret Service, women and men, because I saw a lot of women in those pictures who really were first there to protect the former president. So yes, it definitely raised questions, but the bravery, the training that they endure is unmatched, is unparalleled. So did they make a mistake? We have to see. Also, what I've heard, Lisa, from some local law enforcement people here in Georgia who know some of the people in Pennsylvania, is that was it a failed moment to communicate more effectively with the people who were on the ground? Because you see the tapes now, the videos from the pedestrians who are saying, hey, he has a gun. Hey, that guy's crawling up on the building. So, it's going to be a lot of things that are going to be investigated. And I think it probably will be months until we really know what didn't happen and what happened on that day.
Yeah, I am one who is very hesitant to rush to judgment against the Secret Service or other law enforcement because they got to be right 1,000% of the time. And it's really hard to hold to that standard. It takes an immense amount of resources and foresight in order to do that, particularly in a campaign setting when you are moving from one location to another fairly quickly. At the same time, the Secret Service is dealing with preparations for the Republican National Convention. So there's a lot going on, and I want to have an approach that is with grace toward what happened. And my other side of this is I hate that every time we have one of these incidences, these acts of violence, that we cloister the presidency more and more. Like we put the fence around the White House during the Gulf War 30 years ago. And now when it comes to Secret Service, I remember the 2017 National Championship game when Trump came. It was at a Mercedes-Benz, Georgia versus Alabama. It was cold. It was rainy outside. We all had to sit outside for 2 hours waiting to get in because Secret Service security protocols. It was a massive inconvenience to those who were there to enjoy a football game. And that's because of all of the security that's around these two guys or whoever's going to be the president in January of 2025. I hate to see us move increasingly toward this imperial presidency where the president of the United States is further and further removed from real people. And real people's opportunity to interact with them, to see them in the flesh, is less and less. There's going to be some element of danger, some element of threat in the public sphere in this country. That is just how it is. We cannot squelch it out 100%. And that sounds like it's hard-hearted, but I do think that touch with people, with the American voter, is extremely important to the country. And it is. We are a democracy, not a monarchy. The president of the United States is someone we respect, but is not somebody we consider different from us. He is one of us, or she is one of us. And I don't want to have some overreaction to this where the candidates are standing behind bulletproof glass every time that they get up to give a speech, right? I don't want that.
Yeah. You mentioned this earlier, Brian, and kind of expound on it. We can a little bit. How is this going to affect the presidential race? Do you think it's going to mobilize Republicans nationwide and specifically here in Georgia? I mean, I don't know. I hate to say sympathy vote, but, how will this change their perception of Trump and the race?
Great question. And I think this is the heart of what Tharon and I bring to this conversation, particularly here in Georgia, where our votes are more important than the votes of most voters in most other states, because we're one you got to win to get to the White House. I think Saturday was a pivotal moment in this campaign. And I think that essentially the campaign ended on Saturday. Pre-Saturday, my thought was, I feel confident post-debate that Joe Biden will not be president at noon on January the 20th. That if the Democrats were going to win, it had to be with somebody else. Today, I feel like Donald Trump is going to be president on January the 20th. And I wasn't there until Saturday. And what happened was it unified Republican voters, even those who have had reservations about Trump. Tharon's talked about these voters a lot over the last few years. I've talked about these voters a lot. A lot of them are coming home. They knew they couldn't vote for Biden after the debate. And the way that Trump has reacted to this has been well orchestrated and thoughtful, more so than what you expect from him. I hope he follows through at the convention with a unifying, broad appeal speech, because I think it's not just good for the nation. I think it's good politics. I think he will seize the moment in a way that it calls for, and Americans will respond positively to him being positive, to him having a inclusive American message, which, again, not his specialty, not what we've come to know him for, but he can do it here in this opportunity. And Lisa and Tharon, I think that the visual of him getting shot, getting back on his knees, and pumping his fist with the big American flag flying behind him, blood on his face, I think that plays into one of Trump's campaign thematics, that this is strength versus weakness. Biden is weak and I am strong. And now he has this visual that he doesn't even have to go talk about. We've all seen the photo. It's universal. And I think that that'll become an iconic image in this campaign. And look, there's still, 4 months? How much time's left? There's still plenty of time left in a traditional campaign. But to answer your question, in my view, the campaign ended on Saturday and Donald Trump is going to win.
What's your take, Tharon?
So it's a little bit more complicated for Democrats than that. All right. So let me just kind of play this out. And I want to say this, listeners, look, if you judge me on what I'm about to say now, please go back and listen to the podcast in its entirety, because I showed a lot of respect and unity calls for, sympathy and empathy to what happened to the former president, and definitely the victim and the person who lost his life. All right. So now Lisa is forcing us to be campaign hacks here, talk about what this is for. But I respectfully disagree with Brian on one sense. Look, what happened to the former president is awful, right? I don't want anyone to be shot. But let me tell you what I think it has done. So if you really look at who we are as a country, Lisa, political violence has been going on in the United States of America since 1835. That's when we had our first attempt for a person to try to assassinate a sitting president. All right. We know Abraham Lincoln was shot in 1865, and it goes on and on and on. The most recent one that we had, I want to make sure I get this right, in 1980, we all remember Ronald Reagan. That happened in March 30th of 1981.
Yep.
All right. That's the last time, Lisa, that we saw a gunman use a gun to shoot. Now, what the American people forget about, let me just kind of take you through this. I came prepared for this question. In 1993, a lot of people don't talk about this, but President George H.W. Bush by a car bomb, basically in Kuwait, where Saddam Hussein tried to kill Daddy Bush. We always remember hearing former President W. Bush talk about he tried to kill my daddy. And November 11th of 2011, Oscar Romero Hernandez fired multiple shots in the White House, striking the building. Didn't hit anybody, but this is when President Barack Obama was in the White House. In 2018, pipe bombs are mailed to leading Democrats, including Obama, former presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. And then, of course, on July 13, 2024, you had an attempted assassination. The point I'm trying to make, Lisa, is that we are a country that has experienced now almost a 2 centuries of political violence. But we had not had this type of attempted assault with the use of a gun since 1981. What the president has got to do is doing exactly what he's doing. Show empathy, show leadership, show remorse. There's no way that he can do anything else but that, because if he does anything opposite of that, the American people, particularly Republicans, will say that he is un-American and he's not being a president, right? Now, what B-Rob did not share with you is that there are folks on his side, particularly a member of Congress in Georgia, who are spreading conspiracy theories saying that the president has something to do with this, is attacking the Secret Service, saying that this was some type of maybe inside job, that they failed to protect the former president. Now, how long that rhetoric continues to be sort of muted in a way, we'll have to see. But I think that there are Republicans who are spreading those stories. And I think that, as all of us are calling for unity, there is some of them, talking about that. The president has got to get through this convention and allow Donald Trump to be this new Donald Trump that we've heard from. He talked about the New York Post that he rewrote his speech and how he's going to call for unity. How long would that last? I still think the other thing that this did, Lisa, is that it forces the American people to listen more to our leaders when you talk about responsible gun ownership, when you talk about gun violence in this country and the use of guns. And one thing that we haven't heard, Lisa, which I think is striking, what have we been hearing since we've been doing this podcast now, maybe say almost for the last 10 years? Whenever there's a third grade classroom shot up, wherever there's innocent black people targeted in a grocery store, whenever there are just people who are being killed, whether it's in elementary school, churches in South Carolina, there's always this rush to talk about the issue around mental illness. All right, how mental illness was the cause of these shootings and these murders and these people, innocent people losing their life. We haven't heard that in this case, right, about the gunman. All we hearing is that he was bullied, he was quiet. He kind of lost touch with a lot of his friends during COVID. And somehow, some way, this 20-year-old gunman, this alleged gunman, got his father's AR-15 gun and took it and got on top of a building and tried to assassinate a former president. So what I'm getting at here, Lisa, is that this is a hard one for President Biden to navigate. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It is very hard because you can't go after Donald Trump and say what you were saying days prior to him being shot. What you can do, though, is bring it back to the issues and bring it back to the future. And what does that future now look like post July 13th? I think the president of the United States of America can have a very honest conversation about responsible gun ownership. There's no Republican that now should not be open to talk about access to guns and people having them and that we use them to try to kill a former president. There's been reports, Lisa, that this alleged gunman tried to enter the rally. All right. And the law enforcement members identify him as being, quote unquote, suspicious. So we don't know how many rallies that have happened where you've had armed people in the rally, right? We don't know how many other attempts has happened. So it's going to have to be a focus on the issues, continue to be Joe Biden, the leader that we all know, the respectful man, the statesman. And our convention now is got to be more important to follow his convention, because you got to come out of our convention in August even more unified. So all these talks about we need to go with somebody else, I would love to say to you, Lisa, that that's over. It's not. I think that there's still people in closed rooms meeting to talk about what this means going forward. But how Joe Biden continues to lead this country to conduct himself, I actually think it's better, because if you're a moderate independent voter who has not made up your mind yet who you're going to vote for, I think you're going to look at this president and who's better served to bring this country back together. And now we just start using the two words together, unity and Trump, since post July 13th, if we're going to be fair, right? I mean, I never would say that he was unifying the country, but now he is, right? Through his rhetoric since being shot on July 13th. How long will that last? But how more can Joe Biden talk about things that he's done and things that he will do to unify this country? And then lastly, Lisa, look, I believe this. And again, I'm just basing it off my family and my friends. People call me, and people were terrified before July 13th. Why were we terrified? Because we saw a party that was in disarray. Mm-hmm. We saw a party that was calling for members. There was all these rumors going around about who was going to be up next. You're not going to hear that for at least another week or two. So now this presents an opportunity to the Biden team to get back to governing, to get back to talking about those issues, to get back and talking about his record. And if the Republicans are able to hold it together from their convention, which I think they will not be able to do, there are going to definitely be some radical people within that party that are going to want to say some things that Donald Trump probably won't support. Then our convention going into it is so important, because if we go in there talking about changing course and changing, Joe Biden again, then we're not going to be in a situation going into post Labor Day. But ultimately, I think this presents a unique opportunity for the president to lead this country, to unify our country. And I think that what he's shown thus far, this is Joe Biden. Nobody's talking about him stuttering. Nobody's talking about the gaffes. No one's talking about him looking old. Matter of fact, Lisa, he's been looking better. He's been looking better before July 13th, right? He had that one press conference where he came out and he went on the attack and he gave us his foreign policy master's degree class. And then, boom, July 13th happened. So I think the more and more people see him able to be president, to be presidential, actually, I think it helped his campaign.
Well, that Republican National Convention gets underway in Milwaukee tonight, and we're going to pick up, we're going to do a live show on Thursday and kind of talk about the convention. We'll meet again and do it again later this week. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Tharon.
Thank you.